Hello and welcome to another weekly update. My name is Tom Morgan, and this week I'm going to be taking you through quite a mixed bag of different stories, different links and different things to look at. So the first one, diving straight in, is around Q&A Maker, which is I've covered before. It uses cognitive services to kind of essentially take an FAQ that you've already got on a web page or a series of questions and answers, and turns them into a clever bot with artificial intelligence. Now, previously I've talked about extending out Q&A Maker using .NET, and there's been a good blog post for doing it that the bot framework team have done. They've actually followed up with another blog post around doing the same thing but with Node.js. Now, I'm not a Node developer and I know very little about Node.js, so I'm not going to try and kind of talk about this too much, but I will tell you what it does, and that is to take the standard Q&A Maker experience, so the key value pairs of questions and answers. It starts with a demo, the quick start, and it then extends it out so that instead of just returning textual answers, which is what Q&A Maker does, you can, in your answers, if you use a semicolon and then put in like a link or an image, the code that they go through in the blog post will then parse that and display the image or display the link in an adaptive card. And that's pretty cool, because then it means now you're not just returning text in kind of plain text and kind of boring, if you like, just text. You're inserting images, you're inserting links, and you're making it all a bit more interesting. So you can do that in either .NET or in Node.js. The blog post I'm linking to today is all about doing it in Node.js, but at the top of that they also have a blog link to doing it in .NET as well. So I thought that was cool. It's a good way of extending out the built-in default experience of Q&A Maker and the quick start bots for Q&A Maker. It's nice, it adds a little bit more value, makes it a little bit more usable as well. So I thought that was cool. So that's interesting. If you're a Node.js person, then go and take a look at that. Even if you're a .NET person, it's interesting to read through and just see what they're doing, because actually the same methodology that they're using is very transferable to .NET. All right. Next is a tool that you might find useful if you use Microsoft Teams a lot, and especially if you're a developer and like me, you're in and out of different tenants. So I have my production tenant at work, where I talk to kind of people at work. I'm a member of a couple of guest tenants. I'm guest access on a couple of tenants now, and that means switching. But then I also have test tenants, my developer tenant, and then at home I have my MVP tenant as well. So I have a couple of these different these tenants I'm dropping in and out of, and the problem I find is that kind of experience is at the moment it's kind of not great, the way you have to kind of sign out of one and sign into another, because it means you miss activities that's happening in the other tenant when you're in the other tenants when you're not in them and when you're signed out to them. So a colleague of mine and fellow MVP, Tom Arbuthnot, has come up with a clever way around this, and that's to use Chrome web apps. So essentially to host each tenant in its own Chrome web app. So he's got a blog post about it, which you can download. It's as PowerShell script, so it'll create a new Chrome web app for you with your tenant. You need to go and get the tenant ID, and there's instructions on how to do that in the blog post. And then you can run some PowerShell, and the PowerShell's all there, so you can look through and see what it does. Essentially, what it does is it takes makes up a new Chrome web app with the URL and with the tenant in it, and then installs that and gives you a link onto your desktop, so you can then run in separate instances all your different tenants for Teams and have them all open at the same time. Nice solution, works really well. I've been using it for a couple of weeks now. Tom gave it to me a couple of weeks ago just to try it out and then kick the tires on. It's been really good. It's a really good way around doing it. So if you're in and out of different tenants, I definitely recommend you take a look at that. It's really good. All right, so if you use Visual Studio, which I imagine is many people here, there's a very interesting new service coming soon called Visual Studio Live Share. Now, we've seen this a little bit before. We've seen some little snippets of this happening. Most notably, I think there was something in Skype a little while ago. And there's been a couple of add-ons that do something a little similar, but this sounds like it's going into the main core of the product as standard and is going to be everywhere. And the idea of it is it's for pair programming where you've got developers who aren't in the same location, and the changes they make will appear simultaneously to both developers. So it's a bit like OneNote editing in real time, but with Visual Studio. So it's more than just screen sharing. So it'll be repo syncing, edit and debug in real time, breakpointing in real time on both devices. So really done quite deeply and quite intelligently and cleverly. So it sounds great. It sounds really exciting. I don't think it even needs to be developers who are necessarily physically remote from each other. Like I've seen people pair programming, in our office, and sometimes they do that physically next to each other, but actually sometimes they use kind of desktop sharing tools like Remote Desktop or VNC and stuff like that, just so they're both looking at the same screen, but it's more comfortable to be just sitting at their own desk because the desks are quite close to each other. And people prefer to sit at their own desk. So hugely exciting. We are going to have to wait for a little bit though. It is coming, but it's not coming just yet. I think it is, let's have a look, early 2018 is when it's coming. There is a sign up for early access. It's not guaranteed. But there is a sign-up process. I'll put a link in the notes, somewhere you can go and register your interest if you're interested, and then you may or may not get selected for early access. So if you're at all interested, I would recommend you have a look at signing yourself up there, and then at least if nothing else, if you don't get the early access, at least then you'll know when it's available and when it goes live. So yeah, really interesting. I think that's going to be fun. I think it could change, pair programming is a big deal. So, and anything that makes remote working and collaborating, and it's not just pair programming, right? It's one of the classic cases is kind of debugging problems and trying to troubleshoot issues. And if one of you is remote, that's really hard. Like you end up kind of going at the pace of one person, and with all the overhead and all the kind of latency of traditional kind of screen sharing and stuff like that. So anything that can make that process a little bit nicer, that should be really good. All right, cognitive services and AI. So announced at the Tech Summit in Sydney on 2 days ago, so November the 16th. There's a new kind of technological advance in the way language translation is being done at Microsoft. So it's being referred to as a new wave of artificial intelligence that's going through all the translation technology that Microsoft have, and the translation services. You kind of head up where you've got Microsoft Translator as the overall platform. You've got the APIs, and you've got the various kind of apps and services that kind of hang off that. And there's a new level, if you like, of intelligence going into these machine translating tools. What does it mean? Essentially, it means better translation, smarter translation. Interestingly, it's more. It's the new way of doing it is more based on kind of deeper neural networks and that kind of way of powering machine translation than just statistical machine translation. So there's a bunch of detail behind that, but really the end result for us using it is that the text should be better and it should be more fluent and it should be more human sounding in translation. So if you're interested by machine translation and using translations in the things you're doing, but you've been put off because it's not good enough, or you don't think it sounds natural enough, I'd say maybe try it again, because it's getting better all the time, and this sounds like a step change in quality that's happening right now. So It also means some more languages as well that are happening. A couple more languages. So I think Chinese is one that is really being worked on as well. Because the other thing they're also announcing are tools to help people learn how to speak new languages. And that's actually a really interesting, and I hadn't thought about this before, it's a really interesting use of all this translation and language technology. It's not just for doing, basic like translation. You said this in one language and you want it translated into another language. It's actually, could you use that technology to change how you learn? So make tools that help you learn to speak the language natively. And if you think about taking all the knowledge that the machine learning has around languages and AI, and actually there's real value there in making something, and you could really see some huge value in wrapping that along with some of the other cognitive services that are kind of based on changing in the way that in reaction to how people learn and what works and what doesn't. Custom decision service, for instance, you could have these really personalized training tools that maximize the things that work for you and help you to learn languages better and faster. So this could be a really exciting new innovation in how we learn to speak different languages, all built on a combination of translation technology, AI, but also kind of the custom decision, how we learn kind of technology. So very exciting. But what it means for us on the ground using this stuff every day, the immediate kind of short-term win here is that machine translation is better than it was before, and that's a good thing. Good thing for everyone. So yeah. All right, what's next? So stepping away from AI, stepping away from bots as well, or at least more generally, looking at Azure and what's new for Azure, and that is Cosmos DB. So that's not new, that's been around for a little while. It's their kind of worldwide global scale database. And yeah, it's been around for a little while. They've just announced yesterday that they are now supporting an SLA of 99.999% read availability at global scale. So to break that down, what that means is if you have an Azure Cosmos DB, you already know you can access it anywhere in the world. So that's what the global scale part is, and it's replicated for you. The new thing is their SLA that they're putting behind that, around 5 nines against that SLA. Now 5 nines, if you can't do the maths in your head, I will do it for you. That's 6 seconds a week, or 26 seconds monthly, or 5 minutes and 15.5 seconds annually of downtime. So that's a phenomenally good SLA. I would go as far as to say that's okay for most people, and to have it in just a service that you can spin up in Azure that you can use, you don't have to put a ton of effort into. That's really interesting, and it's a big change from where we were even just a couple of years ago. So I remember working on a project 2, maybe 3 years ago that really ran into the weeds because we needed to replicate data kind of worldwide within a short period of time, and we needed it consistently done. And to do that at the time was kind of hard. It was a hard problem to solve, and we were trying to solve it ourselves, without necessarily the power of Azure, because those technologies just weren't there at the time. Now it's a commodity problem. It's something that has been solved for us already. We don't need to let it hold up our projects. We don't need to invest a ton of time into understanding how to do that stuff. It's hard stuff, but somebody else is doing it for us. This is the value of these hard problems being solved as services. So very exciting to see that. It's a big deal for for developers who have to work at scale and have to work worldwide, but it's really interesting for the rest of us as well who don't have those problems to deal with every day, because it's nice to know that those problems are being solved if we ever need them. So that's good and exciting. Still, those numbers are crazy. Those 5.9 numbers are crazy. So 5 minutes and 15 seconds in a year is your downtime. So that's better than loads of stuff. So that's really good uptime. And to have SLAs behind that in Azure is phenomenal. Okay, finally then, because we're already at 15 minutes, so this one's more for the IT pros, and it's an article written by Christian Buckley around Microsoft Teams, and going into some detail about how Teams are archived. So this is something kind of IT pros will care about. They will get some, I'm sure they are getting some tough questions around archival and where the data goes when that happens. And how secure is it, and where is it, and how do I get to it, and where do I store it, and where do I back it up? How does e-discovery work? How does hold and content work? So all these different things Christian goes through, but he's also very open about the things that aren't there as well as the things that are there. So he calls out the things that aren't there today, and where the gaps are, and where the Microsoft Teams team are working to fill those gaps as well. So there's also some interesting diagrams as well about the archive process, where stuff goes, where it's stored, and the containers it's stored under, and what the different Office 365 information protection tools are to help you understand those. And there's a couple of different types of data, because Teams is it's built of lots of different things. There's one-to-one chats, there's channel messages, there's all the files that go into Teams as well. So he goes into some detail of where that stuff lives when it gets archived. So if you're interested in all that kind of stuff, then go and read his article. It's great. It goes into a good level of detail. All right, that's everything I want to talk about this week. Have a lovely weekend, and I will talk to you again next week.